Greetings, Mavericks and new viewers. Tonight, direct and live from the Maverick News Network World Studios. This is Maverick News with Rick Walker.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Maverick News Channel. Hello, Maverick family. Thanks for joining us tonight. We have a special guest returning tonight. David WILEY is going to join us, one of our experts on the Ukraine-Russia file. So we're going to dip into the alleged drone attack that was supposedly targeting Vladimir Putin. We'll talk about that. Is it real or is it fake? And Lauren Chen, you may remember that name from the Tenant Media scandal. There's a new development on that front, so we'll touch on that as well. And we're just going to review the highlights and the lowlights, if there's such a thing as a highlight from a conflict, a war. We'll give you the milestone moments. How about that? In review. From the Ukraine-Russia war, not special military operation, not after this length of time. It's not, and we'll get into all of that, and it'll take some unexpected twists and turns, I expect, when we come back on the other side of this.
Greetings, brave Mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals, defenders of individual rights and freedoms, credible, trusted, grounded in reality. Maverick News, Maverick News. Defending free speech. Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Maverick News. The world is watching.
Okay, let's bring in our guest for tonight. Hello, David. Welcome back.
Hello, Rick. And a happy end to 2025.
Well, I wish it was a happier end. I wish that these wars were actually over, especially this war that Trump said he was going to end in 24 hours and didn't quite work out that way. How many years are we into this now?
Oh, let's see. This is fourth year. 2022 we started.
Yeah. Funny how these wars never end as quickly as people are promised when some people start them. They tend to become become very complicated very quickly and drag on.
People believe politicians too easily.
That's true.
Yes, to tell an old favorite joke of my dad's, how do you know when a politician is lying? When their lips are moving, right?
Right.
So believe their actions, not their words.
And speaking of, since we're just going to jump right into this, but maybe just for any new viewers, can you just introduce yourself and whatever organizations you might be working with right now, if any?
I'm working with the Peace Through Strength Institute, a U.S.-based foreign policy organization. I'm a senior foreign policy consultant for them. So primarily my focus is on basically all the things that Russia is involved in, because Russia is still the enemy to the USA. Their nukes are still pointed at us. Their soldiers are still opposing us in every country. And their spies are working against us everywhere, including here in the USA.
Has anyone informed Donald Trump? To
sorry, what? Informed Donald Trump? Yeah.
Just asking, because it seems like he quite often, including during this last round of peace negotiations or whatever this was that took place, it seems like he sympathizes more with Vladimir Putin than with Ukraine.
Absolutely. And I would say he has during his entire term. Look, Trump doesn't really sympathize much with anybody but Donald Trump, to be honest. And Putin's promising Trump more because all of Putin's words are lies, right? He can say whatever. He knows has no intentions of ever paying up, but it all sounds good. And especially to Donald Trump's sons, who seem to be more caught up into believing everything that Russia's telling them. More gullible. They don't know well enough. If we say that a U.S. politician's always lying when their lips are moving, then for a former KGB officer, it's just twice as true. They're always lying whether their lips are moving or not. If you go into business with Vladimir Putin, expect to not just go broke, but to go dead.
Yeah, and speaking of lies and moving lips, just within the last 24 hours, we've seen these allegations of a massive drone attack that we're told was targeting Vladimir Putin's residence. And when I saw these headlines come out, I mean, I was instantly skeptical. People were sending this to me and, concerned because something like this potentially could lead to escalation. And now we're seeing the Putin and the Russians saying exactly that. We will respond and there will be escalation on our part, but the timing seems just way too perfect. And I just haven't seen much in the way of, I haven't seen any evidence to support this at all. Can you shed any light on this or give us some perspective? What are your thoughts?
Well, yeah, there is no evidence. And first of all, it's a residence of Vladimir Putin. He has multiple. He spends most of his time in a bunker whose location is well known, heavily secured military bunker. He rarely comes out. I don't know that he's visited that residence of his in years. He has another residence, actually, that's much closer to Ukraine on the Black Sea. And I don't believe it's ever been touched. So if you wanted to make a symbolic attack against Vladimir Putin, that would be a much easy target to hit. But the other thing I would say is that Russia has not held back from trying to take out Zelensky from day one of the full-scale invasion. They had multiple attacks. They've had multiple assassins. Doesn't seem to be a big deal for the Trump administration or for many of the people who were worried about this, alleged supposed targeting of Putin's residence, which I haven't seen any accusation that he was anywhere near the place, which is one of the reasons I believe that there's no way Ukraine would hit it, because Ukraine doesn't care about symbolically hitting a faraway house of Vladimir Putin, especially when it's not the closest one. They want to take out Putin, right? And if there's no chance of that, I don't see them doing it. I do know that they have made some actual serious considerations of striking Putin when he was in public, at least twice. Once it didn't happen because it was actually his body double who was traveling into Crimea. And the other time because the Biden administration talked them down from trying. Also because the Russians caught word of it. So it's not because I believe that the Ukrainians wouldn't try to take out Vladimir Putin. I don't think that they would jeopardize these talks and do something as useless as hitting an unoccupied mansion of his, right? This is theater. And people need to remember the way Putin came to power was by an actual bombing of an apartment complex in Russia, which killed many Russian civilians, because that's, a small price to pay for him to take the number one spot. No big deal. So if he could stage an attack and it killed a few hundred, poor Russians, that would be no big deal. A house is even less, especially while he's losing so much property around the world. His whole thing is he's still focused on winning, because there's still people in his inner circle who are telling him that complete victory over Ukraine is possible. And I think here in 2025, I'm not worried about that at all. Russia in this last year, 2025, while it was a bad year in many ways, Russia almost doubled their number of casualties and losses in the fourth year of the war, right? So at the end of 2024, they were at about 700,000 casualties. Now they're over 1.2 million confirmed. So they have been throwing more and more troops away for even smaller gains. This war is grinding to an end. Their troops are now going to the front line on donkey and horses, because they're not just out of armored personnel carriers, they're out of cars and trucks and motorcycles to send troops to the front on. Russia is scraping the bottom in both men and material, and we'll see how they continue on in 2026. A lot of support has really been held back. There's been no new support during the Trump administration, even though there's a lot of existing funding was there that they could have put in the contract for Ukraine that would have gone to U.S. defense contractors, money already spent by Congress. They just decided not to put it in the contract. So that money just sits there, spent, unused. And what has been allocated, they've been redirecting it to different places because that's something they have the power to do by Congress. And Congress is now headed into an election year. They see the American people very upset all across the board with what they've failed to do, promises they've failed to meet, like peace in 24 hours. And I think that Trump's long permission slip from Congress is coming to an end. I think you're going to hear the words discharge petition a lot more often. So there was a discharge petition that brought the release of the Epstein files to a vote, bypassing the Speaker of the House, passing with overwhelming support of both the House and the Senate, ending up being signed by Trump himself, and then not fulfilled per the legal requirements. And I believe that come January, we're going to see the first impeachments. I think we'll see Pam Bondi impeached over not meeting that. And the reason is simple. It's not just Democrats who are upset, but Republican voters demand accountability. They want to see the Epstein files. They want to see the guilty go to jail, not be given a pardon, not be given a visa to enter the U.S., because he said we'd be talking about Lauren Shen. They are upset. Republican voters are mad. And they also recognize that Russia is the enemy. Whether or not they want their taxes going to support Ukraine, 95% of Americans across all political spectrums see Putin as the enemy. They see him as a bad guy because they're right. He is still trying to win the old Cold War with what's left of the Soviet Union by trying to get it back together again. And the American people recognize that as a threat, and they're not going to accept this any longer. So Congress, so those Republicans who want to be reelected, they're going to have to do the right thing without Trump's support.
Mm-hmm. So you say discharge petition. Is this just, do you think the MAGA base is beginning to fracture on these issues? It seems like when I watched America Fest, or portions of it, I saw real deep division and infighting, especially over the Israel Palestine issue, or maybe I should say, the Jewish question. And then, there's all of that and just all this fracturing. And I'm seeing it up here in Canada as well. So how does this play into what's going on the Ukraine file?
Well, MAGA is past beginning to fracture. They are fully fractured at this point. And MAGA is just one coalition base within the Republican Party. So, because you have your traditional conservatives and others as well, and they are, beyond sick of what's going on. Your traditional conservatives, your Reagan Bush Republicans, they strongly support Ukraine, right? And they're all for sending weapons to Ukraine, especially keeping U.S. troops out of there. They recognize that this is an opportunity, not a weakness, right? Oh, hey, we keep American troops out of fighting a war in Europe just by sending old Cold War material to defeat Russia. They see this as win-win, right? So do I, for that matter. Come at you honestly. This is where I'm at. This is how I see it. We defeat Russia. We send them old military equipment that was designed and fielded to defeat Russia. Great, because we need to be focusing on the emerging threats, namely China, right? So we need to be getting Europe in a situation where they handle the European theater. It's an opportunity, and unfortunately one it's being squandered right now. But as for MAGA itself, yeah, they're highly split. Israel issue is one of them. Also, government financing. They're seeing spending going up. They're seeing sweetheart deals for some, like Argentina, which splits them. They're split on the immigration thing because a lot of, you've got farmers who are like, yeah, I wanted to keep out illegal immigrants, but I don't want all these tariffs that are destroying my business. Still wanted to be able to hire legal immigrants, right? So the ICE is going after legal immigrants as well. And then we've got exceptions that are made actually for some of the worst of the worst. We've seen Trump pardon drug lords this last year. We see him bringing in, just this Christmas, Lauren Chen, who, was caught up in a scheme for foreign Russian agents to influence America, right? And MAGA is fractured on this as well. So, their prospects in 2026, not good. It's only the conservative base of the Republican Party that can potentially save Republicans. And, a lot of them have been driven out by the MAGA movement.
So let's just backtrack a little bit and talk about what's going on with Lauren Chen, because that was, to me, this is one of the most serious things it's one of the most serious aspects of the Ukraine-Russia conflict, the information war. And when this was uncovered, when it came to light, it really did spill light onto a lot of these influencers and why they've been saying what they've been saying and how the Russian influence actually does work on, within America and in Canada. So maybe you can just give a little bit of background to people who maybe sort of have forgotten what that whole issue is about, or maybe haven't even, clued into it.
So Lauren Chen, who's a Canadian citizen, was one of the two founders of a group called Tenet Media. And they specifically targeted right-wing influencers, Republican/libertarian influencers, bringing on people like Lauren Southern, Tim Pool, and others into a media sphere and then heavily promoting them, really pushing them out there. And they were able to do that because of more than $10 million given through Russia, right? On paper, it was given through Russian individuals. Those Russian individuals were part of the Russian government. They were part of Russia Today, and they were directly part of the FSB, which is the KGB rebranded. And they did that, and they gave huge payouts to people like Tim Pool so that they could just rant against Ukraine and convince people on the right wing that, Ukraine is the enemy. Ukraine, whatever you think about it, whether you want your money going there or not, they're definitely not America's enemy. They're not targeting us. They're not trying to do us any harm. Ukraine has never invaded any country. Right? So this is just kind of ludicrous on its face, but Russia's happy to use the ludicrous if it works. And it did work, through pouring a lot of money into these influencers. They were able to grow their audiences and spread their message. And according to them, according to Lauren Chen and Tim Pool, who's now a White House press correspondent, he got a nice promotion as well after that. They were completely unaware where these huge streams of money were coming from and why they were getting paid really excessive amounts of money. I mean, if somebody suddenly wanted to pay you $1 million, I think you'd be wondering why, right? What's the message you're promoting? Why is this being encouraged? Um, but they tell us they have absolutely no curiosity, no questions. If we just take them at face value, that nothing's a lie. They were being investigated by the FBI last year. When the Trump administration took over, those investigations were dropped.
And now the woman at the head of the tenant media snake has been given a get out of jail free card and a pass back to the US of A. What's happened on that front?
I think that the Trump administration wants her to kind of do what they did before, and that is to help him win an election. Because make no mistake about it, this 2026 election is going to be about Trump, one way or another. Whether it's a red district or a blue district, this election is about Trump. And Trump is already in hot water with Republicans kind of rebelling against him and submitting these discharge petitions. It's going to be much, much worse if there's a Democrat majority for him next year. Then we will have full-flung investigations into things like this and not just demands to make public.
So Lauren Chen back stateside just in time for the holidays.
Mm-hmm.
You know, here in Canada, people are so concerned about foreign interference in our elections, infiltration in our government. Everything gets blamed on China. But I also see that stuff going on with Lauren Chen. I see a lot of Russian influence up here, and now she gets a pass to go to the States after this. I mean, there's clearly solid evidence there, and yet nothing is being done. And it just is foreign influence.
Yeah, I mean, the evidence that was filed against tenant media, that's public record. Everybody can look at it. You can draw your own conclusions. To me, absolutely, based on the evidence that's already been submitted, they should be up on charges, not given a visa, right? But I guess they're not illegal immigrants if you make them legal, right?
And I guess it depends on how you look at free speech versus propaganda or information warfare. I keep saying there's a difference between free speech and malicious speech. If you're knowingly lying, it's like false advertising. And when you're trying with foreign governments influencing the political system with propaganda, like every country does it to every country, but on this level in this way, it's clearly not just a problem, but it's a legal issue.
And speaking stateside for myself, I also see free speech as a right of individuals. You, me, the people in your chat room, we can say what we want. It is not the right of foreign governments, particularly foreign governments that are censoring their own people, right? Every Russian and Chinese commenter you see on social media, all Western social media is banned in their countries, right? And they're not using a VPN and risking jail time just to take the official state line, right? That's pure propaganda. Some of it's more obvious than others. They're happy to pose as whoever or whatever and send money to get the message across here, because here in the West, our rights, our freedoms still make us powerful, right? We can do a lot.
And so we are seeing, whether people choose to acknowledge it or admit it or not, there's an alignment here that is very clear now. These allegations of, Trump being aligned more with Putin than certainly Ukraine, and just being aligned with Putin and maybe just for business interests alone, or who knows exactly why. It's just very clear now that he has a bias toward Russia. And I think that should concern us all. I don't know what else you can say about it, but I'll just throw it over to you for a comment, I guess.
Yeah, I think these things like Lauren Chen, Tim Pool, I think he wants Russia to collude, to interfere, and to try to help him get elected. In 2016, right, whether they were on Trump's side or Hillary Clinton's side, they were able to meddle, right? And Trump is afraid. He's very afraid, as are a lot of people in his circle. And I think with the Epstein files, we're seeing just part of the reason that he's very afraid. The truth is going to come out, and his own base will turn on him, right?
They're already starting to. Yeah.
They already are,
Yeah.
right? And they just need to realize that all their worst fears about him likely are true, right? You have to accept it. And, you know, speaking as someone who's often had the worst people kind of defending their cause, the worst thing that can happen to any cause, whatever you believe in, whatever your position on immigration, foreign policy, any of these matters, the worst thing that can happen is that it's poorly defended, not that somebody else attacks your views. That can actually be very helpful to have someone attack your views and give you more media attention and elevation. Now, the worst thing is that you have criminals who give your views a very bad opinion in the public sphere. So really, those true MAGA faithful, they should be getting the criminals, those who are impeding justice for Epstein's victims. You need to work harder than everyone else to get them out for your cause and for what you believe in.
Well, let's start to dig in a little bit into sort of those milestone moments over the past year from this Ukraine-Russia war. And I do call it a war. I know that Russia is still calling it a special military operation, but it's pretty difficult, I think, to justify using that description with any degree of credibility after, well, going into 4 years now. That's not a special military operation. And, you know, what total casualties, approaching, including both sides, well over 2 million, I guess, now at this point.
You know, you may be right. I don't think that we have really any way of knowing. When I say 1.2 million, that's, you know, Ukrainian
just the Russian side.
Yeah, and that's just one side, and they can't count everyone, right? Because you don't actually know when you fire a bullet that you missed. You may hit someone, they may die away from the battlefield, and you never knew they were a casualty. Numbers are most likely quite a bit higher.
Which is, you know, tragic all the way around. And I wish that this conflict could come to an end, but we just keep going through these peace talks. It's like a rotating hamster wheel, and it seems like Putin is just playing Trump every time we go through this thing, whether it's the Alaska summit or, you know, or this latest round. It just seems to be a repetitive thing.
Absolutely. I mean, Trump and Putin, they know where the American public is at. They hate this war. They want Ukraine to win. They want Russia to lose. The peace talks are just a way of stalling. More time, more time, more time. Because Putin firmly believes, because he's being lied to from his own people, that if he just has more time, he'll win, right? But Russia is losing the war of attrition. They are being ground down. You're seeing that. The Ukrainian military is becoming higher tech. The Russian military is becoming lower tech. Now, there are some exceptions. They're certainly evolving a lot in drone warfare. But what Russia is doing as far as drones, it was not possible without the help of Iran and China, right? What Ukraine is doing with evolving drone technology, that's their own technology. That little country is doing it on their own, right? This is not the U.S. sending engineers in and developing new drones for them. That's what Russia has happening with China. China's coming in. There's Chinese engineers learning from this, developing new drones for their own application.
Yeah. So let's go back to, like, I think it was it February when we had the big blow up in the Oval Office, and J.D. Vance launched his attack on Zelensky, and then there was the Russian propaganda that followed after that, where there were accusations of I remember that there were doctored videos making it look like Zelensky had been, like, swearing at Vance under his breath, which was not true. That was another piece of Russian propaganda. Was that that was about February, I think,
It was
wasn't it?
about February, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that sort of set the tone for what came after that. Um, so take us back to February and give us your thoughts on what that told us at the time with regard to how Trump was going to approach ending the war not ending the war.
I don't think it necessarily told us much at the time. Whenever JD Vance is in the room, things are going badly for Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
And for a while, there was a big conflict within the Trump administration. You had kind of the Marco Rubio side, and you had the JD Vance side. And whenever Marco Rubio's voice was carrying, the argument, carrying the day, then Ukraine was winning support. And whenever JD Vance's voice was being elevated, then Russia was being supported, right? And we've seen over this year that Rubio's kind of sinking more and more into the background, saying less of his own words, more of what he's told to, and JD Vance is being elevated more. Which, for whatever Trump's reasons, it's a huge blunder. It's a huge blunder politically. It's a huge blunder tactically. And I don't know who over there is thinking that JD Vance is going to be a winning banner to rally around in U.S. elections. Even Nick Fuentes, who's a big voice on the MAGA side, is coming out opposing JD Vance. So, yeah, and certainly more moderate Republicans can't stand him either.
Yeah, and even, the negotiating teams, there seems to be almost two teams trying to negotiate with Russia, because you have Rubio and his team, and then you have Kushner and Witkoff and their team,
Mm-hmm.
and it seems like they're at odds. I think we've seen Witkoff try to even fly to locations to engage in talks ahead of Rubio to
Yep.
Get out in front of him before Rubio gets a chance to get involved. And there's some competition. It's strange.
Absolutely, 100%. And Rubio's problem is that he's kind of responsible for all foreign policy. So when he goes down to deal with Venezuela, then Witkoff is making another deal with Russia and submitting it to Trump without the Secretary of State getting to view it and sign off on anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then if Trump approves it, then as the Secretary of State, he's got to sell it to the public. A position I really do not envy Marco Rubio for. And then Trump has had, he's got his Secretary of State, and he's had two envoys. He's had a Russia envoy, Witkoff, and he had, up until recently, a Ukraine envoy as well, who stepped down, unfortunately, because his voice was just not being heard. I don't blame him.
So it's just, it just seems like a mess, honestly. And it just seems like the Russians are like, oh yeah, we want to negotiate. And even though, they're getting out the smelling salts and invoking this drama or theater over this alleged drone attack, they're saying, oh no, we still want to negotiate. We're not going to pull out of the negotiations, but it allows them to pivot on all of this stuff. It just seems chaotic and non-productive. It's like a lot of wasted time around and around and around and around, which is why I haven't paid that much attention to this latest round. And what's really come out of it, though, is just within the last day, we've seen Mark Carney from Canada, because we're Canadian, and European leaders meet in the wake of this latest round of, I'd say, it's like one-sided negotiations. It's Trump talking to Zelensky and his team about what a peace deal proposal could be for Putin, and we'll put it to Putin and see if he approves it. And now we've got, at least the Europeans and Canadians getting together to do what? Is there anything productive that's coming from that?
I think there will be. They're not going to talk loudly about it, but there have been a lot of arms and trade deals that have come out of those that actually have substance, unlike the mineral deal that Trump negotiated with Ukraine, and then he's delivered nothing for it. And because those minerals are in a war zone, can't get them, which is another bad deal for the USA. Yeah. So, Yeah, no, it's Ukraine is getting enough support from the rest of the West to continue on, and I believe win this in a war of attrition, which is a very ugly, brutal way to win a war because both sides get worn down. But only the U.S. has the arms that could make this overwhelming, that could end it today. And they're just not getting those. And they're not going to get them from the current administration because if they were going to, they would have this year.
And we're seeing reports that Trump has apparently said that, well, it's a good thing we didn't give Ukraine Tomahawks because of this alleged drone attack. I don't even know if he really did say it or not, but I think that's coming from the Russian side.
I believe he said it. I've seen reports that he said it, and it certainly sounds kind of accurate. But, I don't believe it. I think we should give them Tomahawks. And if one of Putin's empty palaces did get blown up, I honestly wouldn't care. If they didn't want attacks like that, then they wouldn't attack Zelensky directly, right? This is why the U.S. does not take out foreign leaders, because we don't want to encourage attacks on our politicians.
But that being said, I think based on the rules of engagement, the international rules of war, Putin would be a legitimate target because he's the head of the military. So if you target him, not civilians around him and things like, but if you target him, he's a legitimate target because he commands the military.
Absolutely. Not that we've done anything about Russia hitting illegitimate targets, by the way, this entire time. They've been targeting maternity hospitals and children's playgrounds, right? There's never a big outcry about that. It's just regular. We've accepted as business as usual. But somehow Russia is still able to smear Ukraine by making up an allegation that they may have targeted, something the way that they did. And it almost always ends up being either a false flag or it's going to be an accident. We see drones, that are jammed fly into buildings in Moscow. And they're obviously jammed because they're flying straight without any controls.
Mm-hmm. And we've seen generals on the Russian side being taken out. Those too would be legitimate military targets. And Ukraine has been very creative in targeting those individuals. How successful or how much impact do you think that is having?
A lot, actually. And I think one of the interesting things is that we are seeing some generals being taken out in what is framed by Ukraine, and they're actually being taken out by rivals, right? So there is some serious infighting going on here, right? Because a lot of Russian lives are at stake, and you don't want a Russian general in charge who's going to send your son to the front line, whatever. So there are some who are being killed by their own side. But if you do that, you don't do it obvious. You always got to frame it as being Ukrainian action, right? But there are subtle signs that point towards one or the other. But all of that, every Russian general that's killed is good for Ukraine. So just the more body count of officers and leaders, another sign that Ukraine is winning and doing well.
Yeah, and I mean that is creative warfare on the Ukrainian side. You spoke about the war of attrition because it has been a meat grinder war, but it looks like I'm seeing reports that the Russians might need to begin to. And I think we had you froze up there for a moment. The Russians may need to start conscripting troops into service because they're having trouble convincing people to volunteer.
They needed to conscript people into service last year, honestly. This year, they're trying to trick people from all around the world. They've been getting Indians, Africans, promising jobs to them in Russia and then pressing them into the military. Mm-hmm. That's a desperate move with obvious political consequences, particularly for a country like India that's actually on good terms with Russia, and their people have, rights, political power. That has been a costly move for Russia because Putin is rightly afraid of full conscription. Look, they've drained out the countryside of any able-bodied man that they could really take. He's left untouched the urban areas because that is going to cause a lot of problems. He's not, then he wouldn't just be conscripting some poor kid with no political power or voice. Then there's going to be repercussions.
Yeah, and we've seen as much as we've heard from these Russian pro-Russian influencers all through this conflict that it would be over in a month. It's going to be over next month. It's going to be over, very quickly. That's always the narrative. Ukraine keeps coming back with new and creative and innovative weapons, strategies, including, I think the most amazing thing that they did was it called Operation Spiderweb, and
Yes.
getting those drones right into Russian territory. Can you just take us back and talk a little bit about that and how significant
so
that was?
Ukraine had a very surprise operation. I don't think anybody saw something like this coming, but they smuggled truck cargo in all across Russia. And these were supposed to be like portable homes for people. And instead, they were containers full of remote controlled drones. The drones were controlled remotely via the Russian cellular phone network, right? And they used very crude AI, and they launched themselves, and they targeted airfields all across Russia, even deep into Siberia, where Russia thought they were untouchable. And, I would say the even bigger effect than what Ukraine did on that day with the strikes is now that Russia is taking people that would have gone to the front line, and they are guarding their own borders all across their huge country, making sure that nothing like this can happen again. Because it's one thing when Russia can concentrate, all of their massive population onto one place. They can't do that now. Ukraine has shown Russia that they can use any port of entry as a way to get drones in and to hit them using their own networks. Not to mention a global satellite network if they were to use Starlink or one of their competitors, right? Which both are using, which is technology that both sides use in their drones. So Russia has to guard all of Russia, and Russia's big. So that's a lot of people they cannot commit to the front line.
And the psychological impact must be significant too, because it's impossible to hide that from people through censorship. This is happening inside Russia, and this is a conflict that the people were told, as I said, would be over. They were promised that this would be over in like a week, and here we are going into year 4, and now you have actual attacks on Russian soil as Ukraine targets military installations where you have weapons manufacturing and a lot of energy infrastructure, oil refineries, things of that nature. So that's significant economically and psychologically. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, it's not just Ukrainians are suffering blackouts all the time, but so is Moscow today, right? That's not because they're winning the war. And while Russians can't talk in public, they understand when the power doesn't come on and their country's at war, why that's happening and what that means for their victorious 3-day war, right? So Russians understand it's going very badly, and they're very nervous about full conscription. And this could easily spiral out of control quite quickly, right? Russians know their history. They know that, the Tsar's empire, huge empire, larger than the Soviet Union, collapsed because of the soldiers who had had enough of World War I, that it was going badly for the people. That was what brought about the Communist Revolution and the USSR and toppled the old government. They know that lesson. They're terrified of this. So not getting to that point, they will take extra care, because that is too dangerous for everybody who's in the lead. Everybody with something to lose in Russia.
Yeah. And it just, I'm not sure, where it's going from here, but if we've got these strikes ongoing in Russia now, it seems like Putin must be under a lot of pressure. One of the reasons he probably wants to keep going and I'll looking to you for your expertise on this. But he can't at this point just quit after making these sacrifices and asking all these families to sacrifice their young people to this war.
No, there would be a revolt among the lower classes, and the upper classes of Russia, who also have not gotten anything out of this, are just as dangerous, and they would happily lead that revolt against him. He knows that. Putin's looking for some kind of victory, but the more he stays in this war, the more he commits to it, the worse and worse it gets, which is why he's also been exploring the option of attacking a NATO country. This is something we have to worry about, is that he may see his way out as attacking a small country like Estonia, right? Unlike Ukraine, which is big, they could invade all of Estonia pretty quickly. The only thing that protects Estonia is the NATO alliance. If he thinks that alliance won't hold, and he's been testing it, right? We've seen more drone attacks.
Right.
We've seen drones over military bases in Germany. We're seeing sabotage all across Europe, massive increase in it. That's not just because they're supporting Ukraine. That's because he's probing for weakness. And one of his ways out, he needs to deliver a victory to the Russian oligarchs and the Russian people. It doesn't have to be victory in Ukraine. This is something that we have to be careful about in 2026.
Yeah.
Because a frightened, wounded animal becomes more dangerous, not less, up until the end. And I do believe that the end for Putin is coming sooner, right? He's also going to be looking to bring in a lot more foreign help. North Korea's backing off right now. They're not seeing as much in it for them. China's, they could do more. They could do a lot more, of course, but they have their own ambitions. So Putin needs to maybe bring them in or bring in some other countries. He needs troops. He needs material. He needs a lot of things if he's going to stay on with this Ukraine war, because it is just bleeding the entire country out. Yeah. And honestly, even if the war was to end in peace or even victory, I don't know that the Russian Federation as we know it would survive the next 10 years after these losses.
And you talk about the war of attrition. It's an economic war of attrition too, because I think Ukraine has been also creative in going after the oil refineries and shutting down the oil trade to cut off the economic lifeline for Russia.
Yeah. And something people really have to understand, particularly those from the States or Canada, because we have large countries and they're connected by road. You can drive from the east end to the west end. You can't do that in Russia. You have very separate regions that only connect by air and by rail. And the rail lines are very vulnerable. And Russia is losing troop transports, which means that their ability to apply pressure and keep those other regions in line is weakened. And this is why I say within the next 10 years, Russia may collapse as we know it, because if there was another Chechenian war in a different region, they might not be able to put it out. Part of Siberia decided, you know what, we're going to join China. I don't know that Russia could do anything about it right now, right? And I don't think they'll be able to do anything about it for years to come until they've rebuilt, the country's interior and have more military population. It's a very dangerous time for Russia, which makes it a very dangerous time for the world.
Well, I want to talk a little bit about Venezuela tonight too, but are there any other points that you want to bring up, or do you think we should focus on?
I would just say, I've talked about how dangerous it is for the world. The best solution to this is to bring it to a close as quickly as possible. The U.S. could do that. If we gave major support to Ukraine, I think Russia would have no choice but to back out or to just lose. Short of that, this may drag on. And if this war continues to drag on for years, it has a lot more risk of spiraling out of control somewhere else. But yes, speaking of spiraling out of control somewhere else, Venezuela. We've definitely seen lots of hintings by the Trump administration that they would like to go to war with Venezuela. And certainly I'm not going to say anything to save Maduro. The dictator in Venezuela is a butcher and a disaster for the country and a disaster for the world. That does not mean that the U.S. should send troops to blow the place up and come to some kind of fake rescue. There's no rescue to be done there. And I don't even know what would the victory look like. We go in, we blow stuff up. What are we winning? What is there to win in Venezuela? I mean,
oil.
Obviously,
that's what everyone's speculating on, right? Oil. He just wants the oil.
Oil companies don't want to go back in there, especially in a destabilized Venezuela where you would have guerrilla warfare everywhere. No, that's a disaster. Companies need stable governments to keep security. And that's the opposite of that. I mean, they would be happy if Venezuelans toppled the Maduro administration, no doubt. But they don't want some kind of Afghanistan situation and trying to pull oil out of the ground while there's fighting all around them. No, thank you. They've got better ways of pulling the black stuff out of the ground than that. Yeah, and then of course, there's a story of drugs, but that's really overhyped. Those speedboats, which you see in the news, most of which, by the way, are not from the Caribbean. The most popular photo I see of a drug boat is actually a photo of a boat that was caught off the coast of Portugal. Those little boats are not taking the many miles up to the USA, even if there's drugs on them, which a lot of cases there are not.
The math doesn't work. The fuel economy doesn't work. That boat can't get from Venezuela to the U.S., so it's going someplace else. At least that's the way it seems to me.
Yeah.
If
they have drugs on them, they're going to wealthy vacationers in the Caribbean, not to Americans here in the States, which may be the case. Just as likely, they might be smuggling baby formula into Venezuela, right? Because that country is impoverished and starving despite a year-round growing season, because that's how bad the government is there.
So are you saying that the videos that have been released might not even be authentic or real, that they might just be part of Pete Hegseth disinfo campaign or something? Like that's initially what happened, is people like, this doesn't even look real. It's AI. None of this makes sense. So it's possible to me.
Yeah, I haven't seen AI photos from this administration, but I've definitely seen them release photos that are misleading. I haven't seen them directly lie, right? They're not pointing at the photo and saying, this was the boat we blew up. Say, oh, this is an example. Okay, that's not the boat, right? So show the actual boat. According to what I read today, and I don't know if it's true or not, but supposedly wreckage from one of the boats is washing up on shore, and they found marijuana, right? Not cocaine, marijuana, which is legal in 40 U.S. states now, and that Trump is looking at descheduling. And this really shouldn't be that big a deal. Not worth killing people at sea and committing war crimes over.
And I think he's up to close to 100 people that have been killed, if we believe the numbers that are coming straight out of the Trump administration.
Yeah, and we don't get a list of who they are or what the accusations are, and if they do survive, then they're released without charges. And this is, let me tell you, this is going to be another nightmare coming for this administration, because those people who survived, eventually they're going to talk, right? And when we get the full story, I don't think it's going to work out.
And it just seems like this is counterproductive, destructive for the United States, its reputation.
It is.
Trump keeps saying, we're respected around the world. Now, I don't think so, because even on this Venezuela issue, you're seeing countries, I think Canada included, I think the UK, pulling back on sharing intelligence information with the US because of the way that it's being done.
Yep, absolutely. The threatening posture towards Canada, it's discouraged Canadian tourists from coming down into the States, so that's hurt us. We've got people who came here as refugees following the law, and now the Trump administration, it doesn't want anyone from Venezuela, right? And, if you're going to fight the Venezuelan government, the best thing you can have is an army of dissidents from the country on your side. But instead, we're throwing them back to the brutal communist regime. That's as big of a misstep as you can make, right? Mm-hmm. One of the things, great useful abilities that the U.S. had during World War II was Americans who spoke German, who spoke European languages because they were immigrants, right? We got to put people in any village in Europe. We could talk to the locals and we could get them on our side, right? Yeah. So anytime you're going into war, it doesn't matter whether it's going into Iraq or Afghanistan, you want people who are locals to be on your side. And just blanket targeting people from Afghanistan, from Venezuela, and saying we don't want them in our country after, escaping your brutal regimes, after helping the U.S. military, this is absolutely devastating to U.S. honor and reputation for generations. Because even if we do a 180 on it next year, people are going to be afraid 20 years from now that the U.S. government might turn on its promises to people who help us again.
Yeah, that's destabilized, the relationship between Canada and the United States. Bizarre, and to the point where now our government is having second thoughts about the F-35 contract. So, that's a major decision and a major pivot that I never ever thought I would see in my lifetime. This is just bizarre to me.
Yeah, and just that F-35 contract alone is a loss of billions of dollars for the USA, right? Yeah. And it's not that Canada won't buy jets. That contract will probably go to a European company instead. So, this is the USA ends up being on the losing end of it again, unfortunately. Because free trade and good relations are good for us, right? Mm-hmm. And trade wars are bad. The loser of a trade war is any side that gets into it.
Yeah, that's right.
The winner is anyone who stays out of it.
Yeah, the negative rhetoric coming from the White House on the trade file is just mind-blowing. I mean, he's talking about maybe not even renewing the U.S. Canada-Mexico trade agreement at all, letting it just expire. And then what comes after that, I don't know. It just doesn't make sense to me at all. And because he's going after the auto industry, that's also driving, he wants all of the auto plants from Ontario to relocate to the States. But because of that, it's pushing the government more and more toward buying the Gripen from Sweden instead of the F-35s, because they're promising to actually assemble them here in Canada to create employment.
Well, it's having the opposite effect. These companies are saying, well, if we can't have goods flow across the border easily, if we can't build parts in Canada and assemble cars in the USA, and we have to pick one country. And that one country often is not the USA. We are in a global marketplace. So if you can get goods from around the world in one country like Canada, and you can't get goods from around the world in another country like USA, then you want to build in the country that has global supply chain, right?
Yeah.
Even just taking most of the cost analysis out of it, even if Canada's more expensive, the fact that you can order parts from a cheaper country like Colombia and assemble in Canada, well, then you're going to build in Canada.
So when you say the situation in Venezuela seems to be spiraling out of control, what's the real danger here? I think we've seen, I just saw a report today that this drone strike that we've been hearing about for the last couple of days at one of the ports in Venezuela may have been choreographed by the CIA.
Mhm.
So is that the kind of escalation we're likely to see? This kind of activity? I don't know.
There's two escalations that I'm very concerned about. One, and we've already seen it, is that in targeting Venezuelans, we miss and we hit, say, Colombians, right? So one of the boats blown up had Colombian nationals on it. Colombia is a close ally of the U.S. We have military bases there, very great relations, and they're one of our best trading partners, right? When you start killing citizens of a country, all of that tends to stop. They may stop trading with us. They may kick our military out, which if we were to go to war with Venezuela, Colombia is right on their border. We absolutely want their help. We want to use our bases there to invade. Not that we should, just that makes the war a lot easier and keeps American casualties and costs down. Because if you want an expensive war, you got to fly everything from the USA directly to that country. You can make it cheaper if you can just move it over the border from a neighboring country. So that's the first disaster, and it harms all our relations. People don't realize how much the U.S. is getting from Latin American countries now. It's been increasing as trade with China goes down. That's where most of our supply lines are moving to. But the other thing is that a ground war in Venezuela would be a disaster in itself. We could probably take the capital very easily, but it's surrounded by lots and lots of jungle. And the U.S. should know the lesson of fighting in jungles from Vietnam, right? We can go in, but we can't secure the country, and we're going to be the enemy if we go in that way. It doesn't matter. We will unite Venezuelans against a common enemy, and that'll be us. And it'll be a disaster. We'll get embroiled. It'll be a huge expense. We can expect to spend trillions of dollars on that, have Americans coming back in caskets, and we'll be weakened around the rest of the world. So while the U.S. is deep into Venezuela, China and Russia will see their opportunity to move, right? Because we won't be able to help countries resist them.
Yeah, and we've seen some verbal support for Venezuela from the axis of evil. Right? Yeah.
Absolutely. No, I'm not supporting Venezuela. They have very close relations with Iran and Russia. They're not our friends. They're not the friends of our friends. It'd be great if they collapsed on their own. But we have a lot to lose and nothing really to win from invading Venezuela. It's just a disaster. It's good news for China. They don't have close relations with Venezuela, and they would love to see us get embroiled in something like that. But yeah, that's one of the worst things. But you know what? I don't think Congress is going to allow it, particularly in an election year. Trump came in. He was a very popular Republican president, popular among Republicans, not saying popular among Americans. I'm aware of the popularity ratings and everything, but among Republicans, he was popular. He has spent that, right? And he has gotten nothing for it. He is not popular with Republicans anymore. Yeah, there's still a core audience of the Republican Party that is extremely faithful to him. But we don't have things like the disclosure of the Epstein files being passed that he did not want. And that was just the ending to 2025. We're going to see a lot more of that in 2026 as senators and House members want to be reelected. They are going to go against Trump. I think this is going to be a bad year for Trump, particularly on foreign policy. Americans normally don't care about foreign policy, but Trump, with his tariffs and the broken promises on Ukraine, has made Americans care about the rest of the world. They want relations fixed. Farmers want to sell their product in other countries. That's a huge Republican voting base right there alone. People want to build things in the USA, which means often we need to get parts from Canada and Mexico and Colombia and other places. And Republicans are going to vote that way this year, and it's going to be a vote against Trump from within the Republican Party, unless he turns around. I mean, he still can. There's still some quiet voices in his administration telling him to do that. He needs to stop listening to the J.D. Vances in his administration. But right now, I don't see that happening. That's just my opinion. Vance seems to be enjoying high support within the administration, and other voices like Marco Rubio are being told to say what they're supposed to say and stop voicing their own opinion.
We didn't pre-discuss this or anything, but while you're here, have you seen these riots in Iran, or these demonstrations, mass demonstrations? Do you know anything about that? Is there any way, can you comment on that at all, or is it just not in your wheelhouse tonight?
No. I've paid close attention to it before. I've not paid close attention to it currently. It does happen. I hope they have more success right now. Iran has relied on support from Venezuela and Russia to suppress these riots before. Despite the very nasty, hostile government in Iran, there's a large population of young people who dislike the government, who are strongly oppressed, who have been in a position to rise up. But every time they've risen up before, it's been very violently suppressed. And Iran has called in help from Russia and Venezuela. So the good news is right now that I don't think Russia and Venezuela are in a position to send the Iranian government much help. So we'll see what happens. On the other hand, Russia really does not want the regime in Iran to fall. So they may send something regardless. Best of luck to the Iranian people. Strongly rooting for them. They deserve freedom. They've suffered a long time. They really want it. They've fought for it. They've bled for it. They've just not gotten foreign support like they needed. While as the Ayatollah's regime has gotten lots of foreign support that they need to stay in power.
In this past week, we've heard Trump talk about, or at least answer questions about, reports of Iran possibly rekindling their nuclear program. So it looks like maybe that attempt to take out the nuclear program wasn't as successful as Trump had indicated. He said it was.
Yeah, as much as Pete Hegseth said it was. Yeah, and people were fired over that who gave their honest assessment that it wasn't so thoroughly degraded, which is unfortunate. But unfortunately, I do believe those people who risked and lost their careers over it were telling the truth. And yeah, I don't think Iran's secured. Look, so long as Russia is getting their way in Ukraine and we do not support them, nuclear armament is going to be the way of the future. Ukraine gave up a nuclear arsenal. They gave up intercontinental ballistic missiles. They gave up bombers. They gave up artillery, all for Western support, right? They wanted to align themselves with the West, both financially, and so long as the U.S. is protecting us, giving us security assurances, we don't need this huge military. Well, turns out the U.S. security guarantees weren't very good. And the lesson that every country learned around the world is that nuclear weapons are a much better deterrent against a USA, Russia, or China than, promises and treaties that may not be convenient when the time comes.
That's the danger that the world faces now. I think the unintended consequence that maybe Donald Trump didn't see coming from his policies is that because the U.S. is pulling back, becoming more isolationist, and behaving the way that is behaving with these Trump policies with regard to foreign policy, we now have more and more countries pursuing nuclear programs.
Yeah, I've not seen any sign that they care about that or are concerned about that outside of Iran. But it's what's going to happen. And frankly, from my personal perspective, the idea of countries like Iran with their crazy Ayatollah leaders, and they don't care about their own people, the thought of them having nuclear weapons is scary because they'll start a nuclear war. They don't care if their people get nuked back. More martyrs for the cause to them. And, I don't want to see nuclear war in my lifetime. I'm hoping to avoid it.
Yeah, and I've called out people like George Galloway and even Professor Mearsheimer. Mearsheimer saying that if Iran had a nuclear weapon, the Middle East would be more peaceful. And Galloway saying, the similar thing. Why shouldn't Iran have a nuclear bomb? Well, I can think of a lot of reasons why Iran shouldn't have a nuclear weapon. I think you have to be insane to want Iran to have a nuclear weapon, because that just makes the world a lot more dangerous, in my view.
Yeah, so at least, Russians don't want Moscow to get nuked. Americans don't want their cities to be nuked. You can't say the same about the Ayatollahs and the Guardian Council. They are true fanatics. And if their people die in nuclear fire, then they're martyrs who died for the cause, right? We do not want them having nukes. They will stop it. And then, once they have it, countries like Saudi Arabia and others are going to try and get it. And, Pakistan already has nukes. And, India has nukes. And if someone like the Ayatollah has them and uses them, then they're going to start flying, right? And all you need is for Pakistan and India to start launching them, then China will get involved too. And if China gets involved, then the US will probably get involved. That is the real doomsday scenario for this century. And we should all be working on nuclear nonproliferation. I am a firm believer that the Nuclear Nonproliferation Treaty was a great thing, that we should not have a lot of countries with nukes, only those countries that hopefully will never use them, right? And if we can get countries like Ukraine and Belarus to give up their nuclear arsenals, that was a good thing for long-term world stability, because we didn't know whose hands they would end up in the long run. But Ukraine, unfortunately, ended up like, okay, they probably should have kept them. We didn't know that at the time. For those who don't know, Ukraine had the world's third largest nuclear arsenal when the Soviet Union dissolved.
Yeah, and the reason we're really in this mess is because the Budapest Memorandum, which was a security guarantee given so that Ukraine would give up those weapons, has not been honored by, first Russia, because they invaded and they promised that they would come to Ukraine's defense if they were ever invaded, but they invaded. They promised they never would, and they have. And then the U.S. and the West has really let Ukraine down because we haven't stood strongly enough against the Russian invasion. So
Britain and the U.S. signed that memorandum that said we would guarantee their security if they were invaded by a nuclear power. Well, Russia's a nuclear power. And, and really it started in 2014. I don't lay all of this at Trump's feet. It started with the Obama administration. To me, this is one of the biggest screw-ups of that administration, though people didn't recognize it at the time. And I'm still not sure Democrats even recognize it, how big a mistake that was. But yes, we should have stopped it then when it was easier. And every time we delay, the price goes up. So, if Biden had given the support to Ukraine that he did in 2024, back in 2022, I think this war would have stopped then, right? But because it took 2 years to ramp up that level of support, by that time, Russia was deeply into Ukraine, and it wasn't enough to dislodge them. And that's what I mean by the price going up. So,
yeah. So is that the lesson that we should take with us into 2026? Is the reason Ukraine needs to be supported and that this needs to be addressed is because it wasn't handled well in 2014. We've seen Putin just continue to escalate, take more, and now we're seeing, drone incursions and probing into other NATO countries. It seems to be spreading even, and I think people are just largely not paying very close enough attention to all of that, because that is very much an indication that this is at a place where it could easily spiral way out of control.
It easily can. And, you've heard this last year, J.D. Vance and Trump talking about the need to have Greenland for security. What they don't talk about is security from who, right? Who's going to launch drones or missiles over Greenland to hit Canada and the U.S., right? Well, that answer is pretty simple. They're afraid of Russia. As much as they're partnering up to them and trying to make deals, they know how easy it would be for them to send a crippling first strike over the Arctic. Canadians should worry about that too. And we need to worry that as Putin continues being ground down in this war, he becomes more dangerous, right? Ukraine is no longer enough to satisfy his ambitions because it's cost him too much. He is looking for a great victory, and he's going to need to take this somewhere else. Or we need to offer him a true immediate defeat and show him that war doesn't pay.
Well, David, I again appreciate you spending the time with us here tonight. I think Canada and the U.S., but I guess we have to find a way here on the Canadian side to just smooth over some of these problems that are apparent now in our relationship between the U.S. and Canada. And I hope we can do that. I know, we're so closely tied. We'll be forever allies and siblings, I think, unless we become the 51st state. It could happen. I don't know. We'll see where it goes. But I'll just throw it over to you tonight for a final thought. And again, thank you.
Yeah, on the foreign policy stage, 2025 has been pretty dark. It's been a pretty bad year, but I actually have a lot of hopes and expectations that 2026 is going to see things get better. You're going to see fewer Republicans following along with Trump. They're going to start doing their own thing. They're listening to their voters. They're going to give the voters what they demand, right? And you're going to see more common sense prevail, right? You're going to hear the words discharge petition more often. I think you're going to hear impeachment more often. I expect Pam Bondi and some of the other bad voices are going to get impeached out of this administration. And then hopefully we have a chance for more sane, rational voices to be there close to Donald Trump, and things get better. And if they won't, I still trust the American people. We're going to turn things around back here. We're going to have great relations with Canada in the future. And people are going to learn from this, and we're going to make things even better than they were, because now they're going to value what we almost lost.
More than ever.
Yep.
Thank you, David Wiley. And Mavericks, I will see all you guys back here tomorrow night, 7 p.m. Eastern, on the flip side, New Year's Eve. See you then.
This has been a Maverick Multimedia production.